So let me ask a question, and it's the obvious. You kind of touched on this a little bit. So, and Rachel did, and again, anyone can answer here. So why do they exist? What is the point of this? Why take people's property in a county and allow investors to come in and throw their money into these people's houses and take their houses away, as people would say? You know, you're letting people come in and steal people's houses, and the county's not responsible. Like, what? What's going on here? Why are they allowing this to happen? Who's winning in this situation?
I don't necessarily know about, the term winning. I think the big thing that people need to understand, and I think as an investor, you usually come into it with this mindset, but, I touched on this, but all governments, whether it's the county or the local level, or I guess municipality level, because each state runs that a little differently as far as property taxing is concerned, they need to have a budget. They need to be able to pay your schools, pay your teachers, pay your schools, pave your roads, deal with all of those things that we just think like counties can just do. And that's not the case. The property taxes are funding those services. And if a homeowner is not paying those taxes, that's not happening. And so this investment, came along when that was opened up, and investors were able to help counties keep that funding moving, their budgets moving, and homeowners who are, say, in distress, give them a little more time to pay what they owe back. And it's just kind of this, a really great relationship if you kind of look at it in that bubble, in that way. And so, in my estimation, it's a service. Do the investors come out with or earn stuff? Heck yeah. I mean, why would you wouldn't do it otherwise, right? Most people aren't going to come in and be like, oh, here, let me just pay your taxes. There is something that needs to be earned there. But that and I think in our opinion, I speak with Brian, I think on this one is why the industry is even in existence. And there's some pushback in some areas, and and each state kind of handles how they view that process differently, and depends on who's elected in government. I mean, all those things can really kind of sway and change. But overall, the industry is there to in a combination of helping both counties and homeowners, to keep things moving forward. And that's, I guess, my view on it. I think Brian and I are pretty similar in that since we've been doing this for so long. But
I think, why does this? I'll take a more philosophical approach to it. It really comes down to what ownership of property means in the United States. Because not every country does it this way, but ownership in the United States really doesn't mean technically what ownership, the true definition of ownership of property is. Like, you do not own that property outright. If you refuse to pay your property taxes, you don't own the property anymore. I mean, that's just a reality of owning property within the United States. And so because that's how the United States works, there's got to be a close the loop, if you will. So what happens if you don't pay your property taxes? And that loophole was open for a long time until the first tax lien legislation, went into place. And so really what it boils down to is, so if those property taxes aren't paid, and Rachel touched on it, two things happen, right? The budget of the county goes down, typically would go down, because now they don't have that amount to go pay teachers, go pay firefighters, go pay roads. But then also what happens to that property owner? Like, if I'm paying taxes, why does he not have to? Right.
Right.
And so that's really where the legislation originally came from, it closed that loop. It said, okay, if you don't pay your property taxes, we're going to give you a period of time to make that better. But if not, then there's the threat of losing that property to the county. And that's pretty much what's happening, is you're losing that property to the county, and the county is saying, I don't want to own that property. And so they went out and found a way to allow an investor that knows what they're doing to obtain ownership of that property. And so that's really the crux of how tax sales came about. And it obviously has some positive and some negative connotations to it. But that's the end goal, is to ensure that property taxes are paid and that counties have a budget where they can pay the services that they're supposed to be providing.
I mean, I've seen there are places that don't have a process. They don't allow for an investor to come in and help balance those budgets. And what we found interesting in those states, because we've asked questions, and I know the NTLA has as well, but like, why? Why do you do this? And what's interesting, I think, as a whole, homeowners are responsible people who pay their taxes as a whole. And some get into, problems and issues, and there are those distressed, and that happens, and hence why the system works. But then what we found in the places that aren't holding responsibility there and aren't bringing in that investment is you have perpetual delinquencies. So you have people on that delinquent list that are just constantly on the delinquent list because they're not held accountable. And so what we have found fascinating is in asking, and the counties can't really answer the question, is how are you operating then? If you have perpetual delinquencies, where are you getting your money? And it's a question that's usually evaded, but I think a fascinating experiment, because the system is working and has been working for decades now. So
wow.